Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the team, whether you're here live or whether you're listening to this recording. We've got a few things that we'd like to update you on, including, how the year has been so far, what we've got planned for the rest of the year, and also for 2025, which is our 10th anniversary year. So we've got some things, special things planned. We'd like to kick off like we did last month with one of our very special members, Diana Gerwitz, who's based in New Jersey. She happens to be today in Alabama dropping her daughter off at college, which, if you've ever had that chance, it's bittersweet in many ways. I guess it depends on your relationship, but it certainly was bittersweet for us. Although in our case, our daughter lived fairly close at the University of Utah, and we lived in Salt Lake, so it was easy for us. I guess, Diana, it's going to be a little more tricky for you. Have you guys already worked out some sort of when you're going to visit or when she's going to visit, like at Christmas, at least, I hope?
Oh, well, they have lots of time off, but for us, I mean, this is being recorded, so I kind of don't want to give all this. Oh, but yes, we're good. Like, I think it's fine. We're a family that travels a lot, so distance isn't really an issue like it would be for some people.
Okay, I got you.
Yes. Yep.
Is that your only daughter, or do you have others?
No, I have other kids, and yep, so she's just the first
Okay. Congratulations on that. Could you
one.
let
Thank you.
people know a little bit about your background?
Yeah.
Because when you look at your LinkedIn profile, it's very clear you've worked with some really high-powered people and companies, and I think that really creates the framework for why what you went through last time was so powerful, and I'm
Mhm.
sure will be very interesting today as well.
Okay, terrific. So I thought it would be useful. Let's see. Okay. So I thought it would be useful to kind of talk through a little bit about my background today. And
Great.
so the first is to let you know, so I'm a certified master facilitator. By the way, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all today. And what a certified master facilitator means that I've been working as a facilitator across a number of industries. It is a certification that is actually created and managed by a group called the International Institute of Facilitation, which is INIFAC, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So as a certified master facilitator, there's only 50 in the world. And the reason is because the standards are very high, and you have to be able to facilitate across a number of different industries, doing a number of different activities, demonstrating an ability to handle all kinds of different situations with all kinds of different people. So I have done that. Right now, I'm actually the chairperson for INIFAC, and we'll talk a little bit more about that because I believe that members of this group might benefit from getting to know INIFAC and working with INIFAC, because I can't imagine there is an industry or a position in any organization that doesn't require facilitation skills. And I'll just let you sit with that for just a second, because I know that that's a very strong statement, but over the course of my career, I have yet to find any group of people that can't benefit from a facilitative approach to leading, discussing, resolving problems, and managing others. And I imagine that all of you fit into that category in some form or another. Okay, so I'm also a core team member for a group called, I see some people in the chat. I'm going to try to, on my, okay, okay, good, thank you. Okay, yep, inifact.org, excellent, thank you very much. You've got, appreciate that. Okay, so please take a look at that in your spare time, that would be great. So I'm also a core team member for a group called Leadership Strategies, which is known as the Facilitation Company. They created sort of a methodology for facilitation, which is some of what I spoke through last time, and we'll do a little bit of that today too. And that facilitation company is sort of, people come to them to find people who are outside facilitators. Now, if you can imagine it, a lot of their organizations and a lot of people do facilitation every day, but sometimes the situation changes. And what you're really looking for is someone who brings an outside perspective with a set of skills and, dare I say it, no agenda. And it's that lack of an agenda that makes an outside facilitator so attractive for some groups, particularly in certain areas. Like where can you think an outside facilitator might be more useful than others? You can just type it in the chat. Where do you think an outside facilitator might make more sense than somebody who actually works in your organization? I need to think about that. Mm-hmm. Ooh, love that. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so we have a few coming up so far. One says HR, innovation exercises, topics that are controversial, and when silos interests are different, but they need something corporate wide, right? So the meeting of the minds, as it were. So, and sensitive leadership boardrooms, very good. Awesome. And there are some others too, right? So when you think about it, when there's a dysfunctional person, well, certainly when there's someone that the rest of the group has not had very much success handling. So those, when you think about it, facilitation is a skill, but sometimes you need an outside person anyway, because you want somebody who is literally focused more on process, thank you, facilitated debates, more on process than they are on outcome. And that is what facilitation really does. Now, can anyone do this? 100%. Anybody can be a great facilitator. It's really just a matter of saying, I am going to walk in here with no intent, no hidden agenda. Teams are struggling with productivity. Yes, all of those situations. There are some others that we didn't come up with, right? Strategic planning. A lot of times when you've got the board and there's a lot of different views about where to take the company, an outside facilitator can be a tremendous boom, tremendous asset to the discussion. So when we think about these things, facilitation, and I'll talk more about kind of how it works, but when we think about them, so I'm a specialist in facilitation and I go to all kinds of different companies. I've worked with companies like the American Bar Association, the Department of Defense, Coca-Cola, the Fish and Wildlife Association, GlaxoSmithKline, Honeywell, the IEEE, if anyone knows what that is, that's the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers. It's a worldwide institute that actually determines the parameters by which all electronic and electronic means communicate. So for example, it sets the standards for your iPhone being able to work anywhere in the world. Levi Strauss, JP Morgan Chase, Kaiser Permanente, and then McKinsey, the MITRE, Pfizer, SAP, all these different organizations have used facilitation services in some different ways. So if you think about it, facilitation isn't a job. Although for me, it's what I do. If in all of your careers, it's something you do anyway. It's just the question is, are you conscious of what you're doing when you're doing it? So my background is I have a BS in applied physics from Cornell, which may make you think, okay, so how did she end up in such a people-focused career? And I'll explain that. And then I have an MBA from the Wharton School. So for me, what happened is, although I do appreciate a good technical problem solving in any form that it takes, I've come to understand that the actual way to get things done is through people. Would anyone disagree with that? Stop sharing. Would anyone disagree with that? People are the answer to just about everything. Nope. Right, okay. So what we've learned is that there's a couple of things that we really want to keep in mind. And one is, oh, sorry, my system's downloading. And one is that if we think about what we're trying to accomplish, we need to make sure that we're both right and we have commitment to the decision. So how do we do that? Well, one of the things that we do is we think about things in terms of the effective decision being the right decision times the commitment to the decision. So, I need to share this. So everyone can see my screen, right? Okay. So a facilitated session is a highly structured meeting in which the meeting leader guides the participants through a series of predefined steps to arrive at a result that is created, understood, and accepted by all participants. Why is that so important? Because if you think about the way most meetings run, basically the person who's leading the meeting sets the agenda, determines what's going to be discussed, and has already a point of view in mind about where they're headed. Facilitation doesn't exactly work that way. You can have a point of view, but yours as a facilitator is just one point of view. The idea is at the end of it, the end result is created, understood, and accepted by everyone in the room. So we talk about this equation, which comes from a 1971 data mining organization. And it says, what I was talking about earlier, that an effective decision is the right decision multiplied by the commitment to that decision. That's what that R and C stand for. So why is that? Because if you think about it, when you work at an organization and you know you have the answer to a problem, how many of you know that in the problems that you solve in your organizations every day, you're 100% right? You have to be, right? You're competent people. You're 100% right. But how many of you have had the experience where even though you had the right answer, you couldn't get anybody to actually, either they agreed with you in the room, but disagreed outside of the room? Or, right, we call that threshold consensus, where I have consensus until I get to the threshold of the doorway, and then I don't have consensus anymore. I do whatever I want to do. We call that threshold consensus. Or I have a situation where I have, with all best intentions, I agree with what we talked about in the room, but I don't have any motivation to get the work done that I committed to move that ball forward. Thanks, Erica. Right? So those things happen because even though we're 100% right, that doesn't mean anything. I've been right a lot in my life. Let's take my kids. Many, many, many times. Most of the time I'm right. But if they don't do what I tell them to do, it's not their fault. They simply don't agree with me, but they don't tell me because I'm in a position of authority. If that sounds like the meetings you go to, this is why. So what facilitation says is we're going to take a different approach. We may not get 100% of the solution we think is right, but if I get an 80% solution that is correct with an 80% commitment, then I've at least moved the needle. Does that make sense? Can't see all of you. I'd like to see small screen. Yes, thank you. Yeah. So these things are how we think about. So those elements are what we talk about when we think about facilitating sessions and why they're important. So I'd love to get some thoughts. So yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. So I'd love to get some thoughts from you on that. So tell me, when you think about facilitation, tell me how you use facilitation at your job. And you know what I'd like you to do is, if you could come off mute and just chat for a bit, that would be ideal. Is it okay for you to come off mute and talk? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Yes,
please. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I'll take some notes, and then in future sessions, when we do stuff like this, I can actually target some of these to things that you're interested in. So tell me what facilitation looks like at your organization, or what frustrations you have with meetings that you think facilitation might solve.
Erica or anybody else who've been engaged with this conversation, what would you like to share?
I would say for me, I no longer work in large groups, but what I have is the consulting component that I have, where I'm bringing buyers and sellers together, whether it be for property or businesses or things like that. That's where I tend to have a bit of a challenge sometimes, because they're almost at opposite ends of the table. Well, they're actually are at opposite ends of the table. So it's really trying to get people to work together for the common goal. And in a lot of cases, putting egos aside. In a lot of cases, I don't want to reveal who I am, but I want all the detail. You know, those kinds of things are a daily goal for me.
Okay. And do you find that you're using some facilitation techniques to kind of bring those people to the same side of the table when you're disagreeing? What kinds of things do you do to help get the egos out of the room and to help them focus on a collaborative approach?
The first thing for me is identifying the personalities that I'm dealing with.
Yep.
The second thing is asking better questions up front and doing so in a tone that I am working for you to bring this together on both sides. And for this to go forward, you have to give a little, the other side has to give a little, and your interests will still be protected in the process. So it's a balancing act of really working and massaging to get everybody to the table so that they can proceed rather than putting up the walls already and then nothing moving forward.
Right. I'm going to throw out some others, Erica. I bet you're going to say, oh, yeah, that too. How about active listening?
Correct.
Yeah.
Number one, really.
Right. How about having a guidance approach? Like you feel like you're a guide almost on a river raft where you're sort of deciding, you're helping to form the channels that that boat is going to go down so that people can be talking about the major issues and not diving off into random topics. We call them rabbit holes, right? Do you think
Yes.
you do that as well?
Yes.
Yes. So
exactly.
Yep. I'm going to give a few more. How about the idea of being almost clairvoyant, where you can see what people are saying that mean to be saying that they're not actually either able to say or feel comfortable saying. So you're a little bit clairvoyant in the time as well, are you not?
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Okay,
What I find in a lot of cases is that I get the what's not going to happen from the very beginning from each side. And I hear them and acknowledge it. And like you say, navigate so that I understand and then just keep going, not like lessening it as a roadblock. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm not articulating very well, but
there are 8 rules to I am not good at keeping people in the main. Okay, great. So rabbit holes are a big topic. I'm actually going to write that down because we can have a lovely conversation about rabbit holes in one of our future sessions. But so I think that that's absolutely true. So you have this, if we think about it, right? I'm just going to give out some things and maybe you want to write some of these down. But there are basically 8 roles of a facilitator, and I'm probably just scratching the surface. So if we think about it, one of them is what Eric and I were talking about, this guiding thing, this idea where we are committed to a process, but not necessarily to an outcome. We're going to float the boat down the river, but we're not exactly sure of the exit point. And we need to be really comfortable with that because it may be more important to have a great conversation about the things that matter than to get to any particular point of any particular end. And that's an important point about facilitation. The next piece is this idea of being an active listener. You can't really do facilitation if you're not listening to what people are actually saying to you. And as companion to that is the idea of being clairvoyant. So not only are you listening to what they're saying with intense interest, but also you have to be able to be mindful of what they're not saying, right? You have to know the issues that are coming up well enough to be able to recognize what is a rabbit hole and what isn't. And then we'll talk about some tools for getting around those. And also to be able to say, these are the core, they're bringing up now things that we know are issues that need to be resolved, or this deal, in your case, Erica, will not move forward. The other things we want to be able to do is we want to be able to be a taskmaster, right? So I think we had Yuka come up in the chat and say rabbit holes, issue, main issue. So we need to be able to keep people on task and focused on talking about things that are sometimes uncomfortable, but we know that talking about them is better than not talking about them. We need to be people who are motivational. As facilitators, we motivate people to feel confident that the tough work can be done. That there is a point, a method to getting this done. And if we follow the process, we will arrive at a satisfactory endpoint. It just may not be the one we thought it was, and that's okay. We also need to make sure that we are praising people along the way. One thing that I find very interesting about facilitation, and I think, transitions people from being good facilitators to great facilitators. Okay, motivation. I'm taking notes from the chat because we are having a conversation. Okay, so one of the things that we want to be talking about is being able to say that people are, oh, I lost my train of thought. What was I just talking about? Anyone?
You had said praising people along the way.
Praising, yes, praising people along the way. Because what happens is oftentimes when we're talking to people, we think that if people are disagreeing, it's a problem. I'm here to reset your entire expectation. If people are disagreeing, you're doing a great job. Because there is no point to have a meeting where everybody agrees. I'm going to let you sit with that for a second. If everyone agrees, we can just send an email, right? We can document the decision and move on. If we're having a meeting, we should be seeking constructive conflict. So when people are conflicted, that's awesome. Oh, I love that. That's the Japanese way, right? So we've got some, and this is kind of, when you think about it, facilitation is a superpower. If we're done correctly. So I want to go back to motivation because somebody brought that up. So when we're talking about motivating participants, sometimes it depends on why they're not engaging. And I'll give you one little trick that I use. Does anybody use ground rules in their meetings? Yes. Maimon, can you tell us a little bit about that? Unmute for
me. Thank you. So what we do is we pass the hat around. It's important that we pass the hat around.
Okay.
That when we're going around the meeting, we started off with everybody has to have a point. And we start off with kind of like a breakout game.
Yeah.
That tell me what you're doing. Tell me why you think today's topic is important.
Oh, love that.
And everybody, at least has a chance to get their beliefs. So no matter how big or small the player is in the team meeting, that they at least have something to say.
Right. So exactly. So what you're doing is you're doing a couple of things, right? I'll just call them out, right? You're getting people engaged from the beginning, right? And there's almost an inability to opt out of that. I'm going to give you another technique that you might want to use. We call it the introvert minute, and we bring it up in their ground rules. I'll type it in here. So fundamentally what happens is, in addition to every other kind of dimension we could think about people, how they dichotomously split, we have this idea about extroverts and introverts. How many of you would say you're extroverts? Just raise your hands. A few, and surprisingly, the people who participated in the chat and all that other good stuff, right? But what happens is half the population are introverts. We know this, right? So what happens is when we ask questions, especially in a group like this, and I'm sure this is kind of how many of you work, the people who tend to respond when I ask a question are the ones who are most uncomfortable with silence, who, no shock, are the extroverts. So how do we get the introverts to play? So I do something called the introvert minute, which is every time I ask a question, I give people 3x3 stickies. I think I took them out of my bag, but they're the 3x3 Post-it notes. And I make sure that no one answers the question for a minute, and I time it on my watch. For a minute, no one can answer the question. The extroverts are champing at the bit, but they'll write down their thoughts anyway. The introverts are actually using the time to think of a cogent response. And what I can do then is I can play all kinds of games to get everybody to participate, because the introverts have had what they most need in the world, which is a quiet minute to think about it. So it's a gift. And it's actually a gift to the extroverts too, because they get to hear from people that they don't ordinarily get to hear from. So once you, and I explain this in my ground rules, but it really is a wonderful way to get people to engage. And and it's only difficult the first time. You just explain it, say, I'm going to ask a question, but no one's going to answer for 1 minute. You can write it down. The other trick to this is that sometimes we run out of time in our meetings. And when you use the introvert minute, even if you don't get to everybody's discussion points, you could collect all those stickies and you have all the answers to the questions. So it's a little, on the facilitator side, it's a little trick to get what we need to, right? Thank you, Erica. Yeah, so there are so many, I don't know, how much time do I have today? Because I'm at 10:30, I don't want to overstep. Is it just rather business we're discussing today?
You can go a little bit longer. I mean,
okay, I don't want to go too much longer.
Yeah, I think and I want to make sure that we allow people to comment as well.
Absolutely. Well, that's kind of what this is all about. So I'm hoping that, so I want this to be a valuable thing, and I'm happy to talk about other tips and techniques as we go. But I do want to suggest that there are millions of different techniques to address different problems, as long as you understand what the problems might be. Other motivational tools that I'll just bring up, and we can talk more about them. I would love for you to put in the chat things about sort of running meetings that either frustrate you or things you'd like to learn about, and I'll talk about them in future meetings. That would be helpful as we finish up here. If you could do that, give that to you while I finish. Other things that we can do is we can start to use engagement strategies once people trust that we are not trying to get them to do something. So as a facilitator, being able to communicate our objectivity and being true to our objectivity helps us be able to get people to engage in new ways. So I have a few games that I play, and I'm happy to share them with you, that get even online, that help people start to find ways to just get more engaged in sessions. So well, I'd love to get your feedback, but if you don't mind, one of the things is there's so much to talk about with facilitation. I'd love to get an idea of what you're interested in so that I can focus my conversations with you about those things. Could you take a minute and just type some things in the chat? Or I'll give you, what I'll do too is I will give you my email. And if you want to talk about something more specific, I'm more than happy to engage with you on other topics about facilitation. I think it's a brilliant tool. I think there is no one who can't benefit from learning how to facilitate. And I'll give you a few things. If you're already facilitating and you want to be certified like I am, I know you could put it but this is the certifying body for certifying facilitators. If you want to learn about facilitation and you're interested in sort of taking some classes or doing some webinars, this organization is the company that I facilitate with. And that last second group will be people that's where you can actually learn more about all the tips and techniques that I'm going to talk about with you.
Could you also let us know a little bit, how do you engage? What are good clients for you? How does that work typically? And then what's the business transaction that occurs when you're doing that?
So for me, I'm an independent facilitator. So I get hired like you would hire a speaker, so you would say, I have a session that I'm running on strategic planning, or a session where we're merging two companies. But I do a lot of pharmaceutical mergers, and we want to do some facilitation of the workforce issues, or we want to do some facilitation. So we come up with a problem together that we're trying to solve. And then I get brought in to help the groups work through those problems. I work with a lot of boards of directors and a lot of C-suite executives. And I believe that while anybody can do this, it is something that I just really enjoy doing. And I'm really excited to be working with all of you. And in the meantime, I do believe, just so you know, that for me to talk about facilitation is really about me making the world a better place. Because if we could all facilitate a little better, we would be able to deal with conflicts a lot better. So that's my personal feeling about facilitation. I think everybody should explore their opportunities to facilitate meetings. So that's my interest as well. So
I think we need you in the Middle East and some other hot points around the world for sure. When Erica mentioned about her question, and as she was talking, I could see her doing a real estate tour with a husband and wife who had divergent thoughts. They want to get to the same place. They want to live in a good house, right? But undoubtedly there are cases where she's taking a couple around and they're like totally not together. But that's a facilitation, right? That's an example. At Global Chamber, I was thinking of what are the cases typically for us within Global Chamber. I think one is a discovery call, like we're just trying to learn who a potential member is. And so it's just trying to find out. And then ultimately saying, let's do something else, or let's stay in touch, meaning, maybe come back later. And then maybe it's interesting and we want to engage, whatever that is, but a discovery call. A second one would be maybe the next time it's actually a sales call where we're actually having a conversation of, it looks like there's a fit here. Let's find a way to make this work with one or more people. Very often it's one person. Most of or many of the chapters have an advisory board, and rather than a company situation where people are kind of one ilk and one kind of mindset around their company, we have it a little trickier in that even though they're all global, if you will, they're all their own company. They all have different goals. You're trying to get them to move forward for a chapter, and yet they have their own companies. That's probably the most complex situation for us in terms of a facilitation, because everybody's so divergent, and probably the trickiest. And then another one would be just a fourth example would be a meeting. We're doing a Globinar on a certain topic. There might be 3 or 4 speakers. We're just getting through the program. We're handling Q&A, and then we finish. And so the facilitation of that is something we all do, we all need to do, and we all need to be better. And certainly I want to be better at that. So those are at least 4 examples plus one example for Erica where she does that in her business, and probably something very similar for everybody in their own business where they have a client and there's various things they need to do.
As you're bringing this up, it's very interesting that you say that. So facilitation works so well in selling, because if you think about it in a sales context, oftentimes it's really the successful salespeople have an innate ability to listen and to make conversations productive. So if you think about it, it's 100% works in selling. It works in one-on-one. And I'll give you the ultimate facilitation: parenting. Does anyone have kids? Facilitation works so well in parenting. I want to write a book called Facilitative Parenting, because if you think about it, all the command and control efforts in the world fall on deaf ears eventually, right? Maybe they listen when they're 7, but by the time they get to be 12 or 13, if you're not facilitating, right, I don't know what you're doing, because it's an exercise in futility. So yes, if you're anyone who's a parent is automatically a facilitator.
It's hard enough with one child, let alone multiple children.
Exactly.
Does anybody have any other? Does anyone have any other examples, or do you have a priority list in terms of areas where you personally need help?
Yeah.
Could we expand a little on what you were saying, Doug, and what we were talking about? Doug, your example of people buying homes is great. That's like my niche, is really being good at getting people together and creating that win for people. Where the bigger challenge is coming with like larger purchases, off-market commercial properties, or other projects outside of real estate that I'm working on to create the win. And I think it ties in very well with what we're all dealing with in Global Chamber with our clients, with projects that we're collaborating on as well, is creating that space where everybody feels that they're getting a win, not that somebody's trying to I don't know, take advantage of them or get too close to what they do or letting out company secrets, things like that. That's a dynamic I think a lot of us face in our daily lives, and maybe not so much within Global Chamber, but it kind of ties together where we're bringing companies together to collaborate. So just facilitating that a bit better.
Great point, because in an advisory board or many of our meetings, there are people with their own trade secrets and different companies with all their kind of different directions. And so how do you bring them out and bring people together but move forward when they have kind of those things that they don't want to share, that kind of stuff, and they shouldn't be sharing,
exactly, for the greater good to get to the goal, right?
Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
A lot of the facilitation, Diana, that you do might be within a company, and would it be like for strategy development, or what are the typical ones that you're working on?
So you can hear me okay, because I think I hit mute by accident at some point. But anyway, so you can do facilitation within a company to do strategy and to resolve conflicts between departments, but you can also do it between companies. So transparency is always predicated on the ability to trust, as long as they think you don't have a hidden agenda, which is something that I do quite often, right? Whether it's mergers and acquisitions or simply just joint ventures, and even joint ventures, whether it's product innovation line or if it's something that has more of a permanent structure. The idea is that transparency comes when people trust that the end goal is worth their disclosure. So we do something we have a whole techniques in facilitating conflict resolution, which apply to, believe it or not, even though there might be no conflict at the beginning, but conflict resolution techniques that actually help. And they're not like the kind you learn when you take a conflict management course, because it's not like that sort of conflict. But conflict resolution techniques that begin with taking people who are this far apart and then figuring out ways to move them closer together, and until the chasm between them is very small and very manageable. And it's really through techniques like delineation and understanding how the tip of the iceberg and getting underneath some of those techniques. And we use a lot of questioning techniques, because facilitation, you don't need to have the answers. You just have to have very good questions. So those techniques help people, and asking questions the right way does build trust. And those are all facilitation techniques, all of them. So great stuff coming up here today. I like the fact that everybody's sharing what they're interested in.
Does anybody have any other questions? We'll start to need to wrap up, and so this would be a time to ask your questions. And I'm sure, Diana, you have probably a couple more points you want to make.
Taking notes of each other.
Maimun, does that make sense? I know I've always admired you because it always felt like you understood a lot of these issues, the way you manage meetings. What's your reaction to what you're hearing today, or any of you?
First of all, thank you again, Diana. Thank you, Doug, for getting Diana out of the session, because I think this is very vital. There's a lot I can learn from here, and if this is continued, as I just mentioned in the chat, we're doing sales every time. Whichever part of the company you are, you're always doing sales. So I think that's important. In the context of Global Chamber, I think running an effective advisory board meeting is very important. As Doug said, these are people who are pretty much at the top of the hierarchy from when they're coming. So getting everyone together and allowing that everyone has the voice to speak is very, very important. So I think if we could learn more, it would be fantastic for us.
For those of you who are interested in sort of expanding your knowledge or getting some more, I would love to have you just send me an email and we can start a conversation. I realize that sometimes this forum is not directed at any particular aspect, but you all have particular needs. But I am more than eager. So please take my email and shoot me a quick one, and we can start a conversation independently that can help you shape the skills that you need to be successful in the areas that are important to you. I am looking at this list, and there's lots of things to go over. I could probably take over every advisory council meeting for the next 2 years. So, and I'd love to do it. But sometimes I'm available, sometimes I'm not, but I'm more than happy. I will participate as often as I can, and I'm always available for questions. But if you have something specific or something pressing, more than happy to talk about with anyone offline.
Well, I think, and I love people's responses either today or, when you can. To me, what this opens up is that we should be having updates on what we're doing separate from a training and having ongoing training. And I think from a training perspective, Diana, you've brought up some of the most critical issues for us as leaders within our own companies and within Global Chamber. The as you started out, facilitation is so critically important in selling, as Maimun mentioned, but in almost everything that we do, including parenting, which I wish I would have known this 30 plus years ago, but it is what it is. But hopefully all of you can benefit at home and at work. And so are there any, before we wrap up with Diana, is there any other either questions directly or any other comments? Would love to hear from you. And as I mentioned, we will send out the recording and we will send out Diana's email just in case you don't have it.
Yeah. I think we're talking about a very important topic right now, particularly since the pandemic. With that whole dynamic change in the workplace and people personally in their remote communication, if you will, I think this is, things have changed. Things have morphed into something a little bit different. And going back to really good facilitation skills, whether it be virtually or in person, is key, because I think some people have lost that. And I think it's important. And I feel that people are independently trying to work together instead of collaboratively trying to work together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I do want to compliment Doug for a quick second too. When Doug and I first met and I reached out and said, what's this Global Chamber? And he said, oh, this, we get together, we talk about these things. And he said, you do what? And he said, you're a facilitator? He said, the team would love this. He said, this would be a really interesting thing to bring forward for this group to learn a little bit about, and not just, as a member, but also sort of to help with any particular skills that you're facing. And I do think you're absolutely right, Erica, that our distance from each other has made facilitation even more critical than it was in the past. And facilitation is something that can be done virtually, or it doesn't matter. It's one-on-one, it's large groups, it's small groups, and it's virtual and in person, and even over the phone. You can facilitate over the phone. So in every setting that you're in. So I give Doug a lot of credit, for me, about sort of recognizing the power that facilitation has. It truly is a superpower. So thank you, Doug.
Thank you. Amazing. And I think all of you agree. And Yuka, you had your comments. I guess that means you might be an introvert, right? Of how you're doing it in the chat area. But I know you've got to believe that a lot of this is stuff that you're really good at and that you want to continue to get better at.
Yes, I do. And I think you hit a right point, that I believed I was an introvert, but I have my doubt. I have my extrovert moment, just like this.
Thanks for your comments, Diana. Thank you, and we'll be in touch. And if you're open to having this ongoing dialogue, it would be amazing, because this is a topic that doesn't end. And I think there's multiple layers of positive here. One is certainly for us and our team to have better skills in this, and I passionately want to improve my skills. I know, and I'm transferring it over to the team, just thinking that we all want to be better at that in our personal lives and in our work life. And then secondly, this is a skill that we know we're probably collectively better than average in this. And what's happening in industry and our members and the companies, they're not typically as good as we are typically. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to add value by getting you connected in to some of our members and into the communities where it makes sense for you to be connected. And I also want to pursue that side of it as well.
Great. Wonderful.
Did you have any wrap-up comments that you would like to make?
Just that I think that you're absolutely right. I think what makes, so you're all automatic, you're already taking great strides into having better facilitated conversations with everyone you talk to because you're intellectually curious about it. If we can ramp up this just the intellectual curiosity about what it takes to have better relationships, better business relationships, more focused conversations, more important conversations about things that actually matter, then I think we all can take a great giant leap into the future. So I'm delighted that I think that Doug is 100% right. You are well on your way. You're already there, right? It's just a matter of honing a few skills. The trick is to get everybody we talk to understand that this isn't a magic trick, right? This is really about being intellectually curious about how to do what we do better. So thank you for the opportunity.
No question, whether as a parent or a family member or a friend or our own businesses or global chamber or a business that we're looking to help as a member or as a client or the community. There's so many layers where this can be beneficial. So thank you, Diana, for joining today. We're going to continue our meeting just for a few more minutes, but I'll be in touch with you separately.
Great, thank you. I'll say goodbye.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thanks. Take care. Yeah. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Diana. Any comments, any further comments on what you heard today and what you're going to be taking away?
Doug, I think this is great. As you said, this is can be applied in so many spheres: negotiations, training, seminars, meetings. The webinar that you referred to that had over 300 people, that was getting kind of dicey because we had Tal. The Middle East is a very sensitive issue over here, and there was somebody making a very inappropriate comment. So you have to facilitate that if that comes in, even though that was in the rules that you cannot make any discriminatory remarks. There will always be those outliers. So to understand that how we can have an encompassing workplace meeting where we can show respect, where we can actively listen and contribute, I think it's very valuable. This would be a great skill to develop.
It's a good point because sometimes we are faced with conflict and a variety of different ways, and overcoming that, whether it's a one-on-one or when it's more complicated, when you're in a group and you don't know where everything lies, that's tricky. And so we definitely want to help and assist with all of you. This seems like one that we can definitely all improve. And any other comments?
I have to agree with Maimoon on that. And it really is just emphasizing my point about how things have changed since the pandemic and the noise around us that we're bombarded with just, out there in the world. We're a very dynamic group of individuals working well together. And I think, as other people come into our spheres, there is a greater need for better facilitation, or that to be a skill that continues to be expanded upon or improved upon. It's just critical because like we're saying, people have divergent views on things, and they can be politically charged or religiously charged or anything else that's an outside influence that could be brought into meetings that we're a part of, or group conversations.
I think I totally agree. when we think about historical and somebody just simple, like let's take Joe Biden as an example. He's from a different world. He reminds me a lot of my father-in-law who fought in World War II, and he was such a kind person and so polite and respectful. And I think historically, other than like, Caesar and back in those days when people were much cruder, there was a period of time historically where people were much more polite. They may have not have been advised, like cross-racial issues and things like that. There's all sorts of things that were screwed up. However, there was a politeness about society at one point, more so than today with social media and trolling. And it seems like it's more accepted for people to blurt out stuff and to be abrupt and to just be more aggressive, or what seemingly is aggressive. So that someone like Joe Biden, who is actually quite an amazingly kind person and mindful, could be disparaged for being that. It boggles my mind that we're in a world that seems to be headed that way. And to me, that's part of what we have a responsibility for: our own worlds, our own children, our own world and community around us. And I'm trying not to be political. I'm just mainly acting or talking around the way people behave. In DuPont, where I worked, people were professional and polite, and we were all hired a certain way. And so we got along. There was never anything really aberrational that ever happened. And then as soon as I left and started working with small businesses, I was facilitating a meeting where one brother, they both own the company, threw an ashtray at the other one. I was thinking, oh my God, like I've never seen anything like that in my life. And I think probably all of you have had those kinds of experiences where people are just acting in a way you would never expect them to be. Very rarely they'll be Global Chamber members. However, there's a gradients here, right? There's certain people that have not had the training, are different from other people. And so that puts it on us all to be a lot wiser and be able to kind of bring people together. So I think my takeaway here is we need a separate monthly training session on just us as leaders of our global chamber responsibility and beyond, and thinking about it in terms of all the other things that you do. And then we probably need another session that is separate, that is an update on what things are. And if that works out well, great. If it doesn't, let me know your thoughts. I have to jump off the call because of some presentation that I need to give. And I'd like, if you don't mind, because it's related to what we've been talking about, I'd like to finish up with something. Do any of you still doing Shirzad Chamine with positive intelligence, or any of you, show of hands, anybody have positive intelligence still? No? Okay. So this was something we did last year. They're members of Global Chamber, and I still do it every day just to try to get into the zone. And today's session for me was very complementary to what we're talking about today. And so I'd like to hopefully play this if I can. Let me see if I can. Hold on.
Think about it.
I've got it. I think I have it. Let me mute this. Okay, I think I've got it. That should work. You guys can hear me, right?
The volume is a little low, Doug.
Can you hear me? Okay.
So we can hear you.
Okay, let me see if this will work. No, I didn't figure it out. Oh, I know. Maybe this will do. Maybe this will do it. I turn that down. I turn this. And then no. I'm not gonna. Well, that was a mess. I'm sorry. He talked today about positive words and what words are positive and how to lead people. Basically, he was saying how to facilitate people in a positive way. One of our advisory board chairs, Jeffrey Garza Walker, for the Phoenix chapter, he's the most amazing person I've listened to in terms of the words he uses, the phrase he sends out, the way he facilitates a meeting is really extraordinary. And I try to tap into that zone for him. So I'll try to, if I can figure out a way to get this recording done, I'll send this out with everybody for the meeting. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap up today. One person on this call, maybe it would be great to hear from as just a final word. Nima, I don't know if you can say anything or if you're in a position where you're open to saying anything, but could you just introduce yourself? And this is your first meeting with the Global Chamber Group from Tanzania. Could you just say hi and any reaction to what you've heard today?
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Neema Mleli. I'm a CEO. Also, I own a company called African. But I work with women, youth, and children leadership programs and also export readiness. Nice meeting you all, and I'm very excited what I've learned today about facilitation. It's something that I needed to hear, and I really want to learn more. And I think I've seen the link of getting certification. I think I'm going to jump on that. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Nima has joined us, and as we talked, she's very interested in women entrepreneurs and getting them to be successful. She loves to work with young people and getting them to be more effective leaders, but also to be export ready. And so when she was talking, my head was exploding. It's like, wow, this is perfect. These are the kinds of people we want to meet more and more around the world. And this is the possibility of Global Chamber. Every country with amazing leaders like Nima, the rest of you here in the room. Let's continue to make progress. I really appreciate, Nima, you joining, and also thanks for everybody for taking time today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Where is she? Where are you based?
She's in Tanzania.
Wonderful. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Global Chamber. Yes. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.